So I've been trying to get better at lighting subjects in small spaces using minimal lighting. So I made a few lighting scenarios in my apartment, and I wanted to show you some of the behind the scenes and how I created those shots. After that, I'm going to show you how I lightly graded those shots using Dehancer right inside of Premiere Pro, which, by the way, I have a coupon code for. So if you want 10% off of Dehancer, you can use the code right below, and it will also help me out with some affiliate commissions. So thank you. If it helps both of us out, I'm not even shameful about it. Let's get into the shots. So in this shot, what I was trying to do is play around with the spotlight mount, which I really love. It makes it sometimes really easy to create highly stylistic looks. So I just wanted to practice with it. I used it with the 60X just to be able to see how bright of an image I can get from the 60X with the spotlight mount. And I also actually did it during the day, although it was a cloudy day with the curtains off, and I believe I cranked it up to 100%, which forced me to kind of underexpose the shot a little bit, which made things look a bit darker. And then additionally, just to lift up the shadows on the other side and add a little bit of color contrast, I added an MT Pro and set it to blue at about 25%, give or take, and I just kind of had it push from the other side, and that's how I got this look. For the second shot, I wanted to do a little bit different. I didn't care about continuity, so I was just kind of playing around. Instead of using the spotlight mount, I switched to using the softbox FE, or whatever it's called. It's basically the smaller softbox that they make for Amaran lights. And I basically just kind of boomed it over my face from the side. Even though this is a smaller softbox, I kind of put it really close to my face, which is what helped give me still a nice key light. And then on the other side of that, the MT Pro, same thing, but I just kind of put it behind me so that it acts as more of a backlight, and it's also bouncing off the wall, so it's adding a splash of blue. And I kind of like that color contrast. Same old YouTube orange and blue look. This is another example of teal and orange look. I could have gone with any color, but there's a lot of tricks actually that you can do in post to change those colors very easily. So yeah, for this shot, clearly, as you can see, all I did was I added the MT Pro at the top of my door and set it to the faulty bulb setting, and just kind of kept it to a cyan color. Meanwhile, in the foreground, I just kind of turned on my lamp, and I think my camera was set to around 4300 Kelvin. And then guess what? I did the exact same thing for this shot. Well, same idea at least, but just different placements. Kept the lamp open, added blue behind me, and I also added blue off screen so that there's kind of a gradation to the image. There's blue and then orange and then blue, and then there's kind of more unity, I feel like, if I added blue in only one spot versus two spots. I really like this shot because it looks more realistic, obviously, than a lot of the other shots I've been creating. I used the same method as the other shot with the 60X, but this time I used the 300C because I wanted a much brighter look. I wanted it to actually resemble sunlight, and I want to be able to underexpose a lot. Also, I shot this clip on a day that was brighter, so I needed the light to be even brighter so that it kind of overpowers the ambient light that's coming from the window that you see here in my apartment. And what's cool is my fridge creates this streak of light across it whenever I shoot it with a spotlight, and I kind of like that look. It kind of makes it look like there's, you know, unintended leading lines kind of leading you to look at the subject. And this is how you know I'm a videographer at heart, is that one of my lighting tests is an interview test. Kind of boring, but I like interview shots. What I wanted to do for this one is I wanted to find a way to get an even softer look than just using a softbox. And what I tried for this one was to use a softbox and then just shoot it through another layer of diffusion right in front of it. So that way it's going through 2 layers and more distance, but keeping the light source large still. For this shot, I used a 300C, but it was at 100%, and I was barely at a point where it's as bright as I wanted it to be. But if I added, let's say, a grid to the softbox, or if, let's say, the lamp in the background was a little bit brighter and I needed it to be a little bit more underexposed, that would have made the key light not as bright. So even with the 300C, it was just bright enough. And yeah, then I also added a little bit of a kick from the back using an MT Pro, again, with just a little bit of orange on my arm, and I used that as motivated lighting, which, you know, is supposed to be coming from that lamp to the left of the screen in the background, making it look like that's what's hitting my arm. And last but not least, This is a very mundane and normal shot of a plant hanging from a wall. But the reason I wanted to test this out is because I actually shot this at night, and I wanted to see how well I can replicate a daylight look with only artificial lighting, with no help from the sun whatsoever. And I think, in my opinion, I think I succeeded. This was done in a very, very simple way. All you need is just a bright light. Now you could realistically do this with a 300C, no problem, but I did it with the 600X. And the way I did it was I added the Fresnel on the 600X and then shot it at the wall that's like right in front of the plant, and from that wall it bounced back to the plant, which is what gave us this soft lighting, which is, you know, kind of casting these nice shadows on the left wall here. All right, now I'm gonna show you how I graded those shots using Dehancer. Generally for these kind of tests, I just have one adjustment layer and add small corrections to the clip. So this adjustment layer is what would have Dehancer. And so I would just search for Dehancer, and I already have a template made for it. So when I click it, things already look pretty decent, and that is because the template is, you know, I have it set to the FX3 already. So usually it would just default to something random. So I selected the FX3 and then saved this as a template, so that every time I launch Dehancer, it would automatically use the FX3 profile. So when I add Dehancer, the first thing I do is I go to the film tab and I take it right to the beginning here. Usually it you know, starts somewhere random again. So I just take it to the very top, and then I just start scrolling through and see which image I like. I landed on this one. So once I select this one, then usually I just go to the color tab because it's a little bit easier to do things here. And that's when I start to finesse some things. Like for example, I see here that the blacks are like kind of super crushed. So I like to maybe bring those up a small amount, just so that they're not fully crushed like this. I like for there to be a little bit more, you know, a little bit more information on the blacks. And then I also like to not make things too hot. Like this might look a little bit too bright here. So I want to just kind of reduce that to around the 80. So maybe minus 0.1 on the exposure, and then maybe a little bit minus 10 on the highlights. Very small corrections here. Dehancer usually gives me a really good look almost right away, so I usually only just do minor corrections. This clip seems a little bit too blue for my taste, so I added a little bit of orange. I don't know, this seems a little bit underexposed to me, just a little bit. I mean, it's all taste anyway. You can have it be darker or brighter, but I kind of want it to be a little bit brighter, just a tad. And also increase the blacks here so that it's not just fully crushed. Before, after. Here's something cool that I wanted to show you. I have the Dehancer adjustment layer, and this is my clip. So all I have to do is go to my clip, into the curves, and in here I can easily select, either using the quick whip right here, or you can just manually select, you know, like the blue, for example, and then 2 other points around it. And then now, by the way, this is hue versus hue. Now I'll take this and I'll go up or down. And as you can see, we successfully changed that blue to a green swiftly, and vice versa. There we go. Now it's purple. I'm gonna hit play here. Like, there's no disgusting looking banding. There's no, you know, weird pixelation or discoloration or anything. And obviously, if you take it too far, you might see some issues pop up. Well, to be fair, this is the halation coming from Dehancer. So if you want, you can go back here, decrease it, or even turn it off, just so that you can see what you're doing. And then you can add it back on afterwards if you'd like. All in all, this is a really cool way to at least slightly, if not heavily, adjust your RGB lighting, because you can easily just select a hue and change it. Here's another example of that, where let's say, you know what, I like this orange, but I don't like this cyan. And so I can go in, take this drop tool, select the door, and maybe increase the selection range here. And then I could just slowly increase that. And now we're going towards green, or I can decrease it and go towards purple. And that was a very easy adjustment. And then I can, if I want, I can take that drop again select the orange, increase selection areas, and go up to add red, go down to go back to green, and it's a really easy process. And it's actually even easier to cheat with Dehancer because, you know, sometimes if you push the colors too much, it might pixelate or it might add banding to your footage, especially if you're working with 8-bit footage. But with Dehancer, you can just add grain on top of it and it will fix a lot of that pixelation. Now, last but not least, this interview shot, it turned out decent, right? Like in terms of lighting, it's fine. But I realized that the exposure was a little bit wacky. It's a little bit overexposed and it didn't seem like there was enough contrast in the shot to make it look interesting. So I ended up having to do a few things more than the other shots. So all I had to do here was drop the shadows quite a lot to minus 35-ish. And that right there does a huge difference. When you reduce the shadows, now you can actually see contrast around my face. You can see how on one side it's well lit and on the other it's actually darker. And then I added a little bit of contrast, I believe, and then kind of pulled up the blacks a little. Just kind of play with it. I don't like having these super hot spots, especially when they're above 90 IRE. So I like to just do minus 0.1 or maybe even minus 0.2 if I wanted. And then if I wanted to get even more selective, I would copy paste this Lumetri color and then hit reset here to reset it. Grab the circle tool, just click on it, make it a bit bigger such that it's kind of covering my torso, give or take, and add a lot of feathering. And by a lot, we're talking like, you know, 1500 or so. And I'm on a 4K timeline here just for reference. And then when it's that big and that feathered of a selection, when I go in and do a slight adjustment, it's, as you can see, not that harsh of an adjustment. It doesn't look unrealistic, right? And you can name these just to be organized. You can say face exposure lift, and this is CC, just color correction. And so in the exposure lift, if I just do a little before and after here, so if I take out the color correction, just those two Lumetri effects, just delete them, it looks horrendous. And here it is with just a little bit of color correction. And to this one, I really barely did anything. I just noticed that maybe it was a little bit too dim, especially because I was going for this, you know, bright sun daylight look. So I just kind of increased the exposure a little bit, added some contrast, maybe a little bit of warmth, lower the shadows, and that's it. Just kind of add a little bit of punch. I hope this video was helpful or entertaining in any way, and I'll see you in the next one.